thank you everybody for joining us in this session. Here we will talk about goal number 11, which is about sustainable cities and community, and in particular, how data can be an opportunity for sustainable cities. And today with me to discuss this very interesting topic, we will have Maria Cristina Bueti, Counsellor in the International Telecommunication Units at the UN Nation. We will have Ger Baron, who is CTO at the City of Amsterdam, and especially responsible for innovation, R&D, and innovation partnership within the City of Amsterdam. And we will also have Eric Legale, who is Managing Director in Issy-Media and responsible for communication and innovation in the city of Issy-Les-Moulineaux in France. So thank you very much to the three of you. And before we start this very interesting discussion, we would like to hear a bit more about the people who are attending this session, and that's the reason why we would like to invite you to connect to menti.com. So normally you have done a rehearsal in the first plenary, so now you know how it works. You go to menti.com and insert the code 71854790. Once you're there, we would like to know what are fields of the 11th Sustainable Development Goals where you think better data sharing can help achieve the goal. Right, we have at least 20 participants. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, perfect. It gave 2 more people the chance to answer. So as we see, like it's a tight between a lot of different like section of sorry, political ambitions, but housing is one of the main concern just before connected territory administration, and all the followers are also very tight. So it's very interesting. Thank you very much for taking this poll, and I suggest right now that we can start with the real discussion, but I think this is a very interesting thing. So now, as you just saw, data is everywhere, right? So we have it now everywhere around our territories, whether in housing, in energy, in education. We can see a lot of data also in like waste management, water, air pollution, mobility, of course, even in health. So like our current territories are bringing a lot of data, and with such a large amount of it, obviously we can also have foresee other challenges, such as which data are relevant, how to store them, what is the environmental impact of it, because obviously storage means more CO2 emissions, how those data can be updated, collected, who owns those data, how to manage them, what's the security behind, what is the relevant use of it, how to evaluate it, but also what is the good network and infrastructure to support such a large amount of data. So it's a big deal and it's a big challenge, and I'm very happy to animate today this discussion, because I think with the panel we will have some answers to all those challenges. What we can see is that smart territory, such as the picture that we just see now, is a transversal approach by nature. And maybe we can go to the next slide. Transversal approach means that it needs a collaboration between a lot of stakeholders. Like territories cannot be alone in managing their own sustainability. It needs collaboration among with citizens, with city officers, with companies, to build a strong vision and a resilient territory based on all those ambition and with the data as a ground as well, to accelerate the achievement of more sustainable territories. So this is what we will be talking about today, and I think this is a main point that we will see as how to better share data and how we can have more collaboration between stakeholders for data collection. Sorry. And this vision is already something that exists. It's not something just in the future. And we can see today there are a lot of different initiatives, and maybe we can skip to the next slide, please. All around the world, we can see, just as a quick example, obviously, we have in Capgemini, we worked a lot on Dijon, which is one of the smart cities in France, but we can as well talk about the data sharing in Brussels with the Data Store Brussels, which is an open data platform allowing everyone in the Brussels region to access a large amount of different data across the Atlantic. New York City has also developed a platform to share a large amount of public data as open data broken down into different categories for everybody to be able to access and to develop new services. So I think those types of examples are showing how everywhere in the world we are starting to see these initiatives. And I think, Cristina, you have been working in one of those initiatives, and I would be very interested to hear a little bit more about what you have worked. I think it was a multiple project in 50 cities. So maybe you can tell us more about the concrete benefits for city to leverage data.
Thank you, Solène, and thank you for this question. And good morning, good afternoon to all colleagues and participants. Well, certainly in the ITU, we had and we have the opportunity to collaborate with many cities worldwide. The ITU is co-leading a United Nations initiative called the United for Smart Sustainable Cities, or U4SCC. And through these initiatives, actually, we have developed a set of key performance indicators that help cities actually to assess the level of smartness, sustainability, and progress towards which they are achieving the SDGs. And this set of key performance indicators are actually based on an international ITU standard. So the way basically on how cities use these KPIs is pretty simple. It is like a sort of self-assessment tool that really helps cities to put in place effective policies which are based actually on data. And that's very important, especially for those cities that they have limited resources, that, you know, they have overcome significant challenges. And when it comes to decide where budget should be placed in which key areas, it is actually much easier to see which are the areas where the city requires specific support. Of course, this is just one of the examples of the work that we are doing, but I think that is pretty enriching, especially for cities that they have. And they have used and implemented the KPIs, and they actually now regularly use the KPIs as a sort of also benchmarking method. So, for example, they do a first year implementation, and then they do a second year, and then they're able to track the progress from one year to the other to another, which means that the city really it is able to share with their citizens actually the results of how effective their policies, activities, projects in a more, I would say, transparent manner. And that's really, I believe, one of the successful examples on how cities they're leading and how cities they're really using data for good. As we know, we are exposed to an incredible amount of data, but the giving the ability to cities to discern the data in a way that they use the data for good to shape their policies, is quite important and quite a useful tool.
And Cristina, those cities that contribute to the program, did they also participate to build the KPI, or is it a framework?
Absolutely, absolutely. That was, a key important step. You cannot envisage to develop actually really a set of KPIs for cities without having cities involved. I'd like also to mention that despite we had over 50 cities that contributed actively, which I mean really leading actually the work, so not only participating in a wait and see position, but we also posted the set of KPIs for public comments for a month, and we received something like almost 500 comments, and many of which were actually from cities, which was fantastic, because you may imagine that receiving 500 comments, it means that your set of KPIs is really not good. On the contrary, we were so lucky to have so many city representatives actually telling us, giving us hints, sharing with us what the difficulties would be, especially when you really aim to develop a set of KPIs which can be applicable to a city like Buenos Aires, to a city like Geneva, to a city like Pugli, for example, that has like less than 50,000 inhabitants. So we went through different iterations, and now we have a set of KPIs which has a set of what we call it core indicators applicable to all cities worldwide, regardless of their size, geographic location, and a set of advanced indicators which are more tailored for cities which they have already embraced and initiated their smart sustainable city journey, which means that is a bit more challenging for them, and they need actually a bit more a set of KPIs that can really help them to improve further what they have already in place.
And maybe a last question on this initiative. So I understand you have a very good feedback from the participant cities, and you built together the set of KPIs. Do you also organize some kind of best practice like workshop among the participants, so they can also share on their challenges and best practices? And
well, I'd like to mention that briefly, that as I said, that this set of KPIs, they were built based on an international standard, which, as you can imagine, has already a quite long process in terms of involving governments, industry, and academia. And on a second step, we involved the cities. We had actually broader participation from various stakeholders, noting that the EU4SDG is an open platform. It is a UN initiative which is supported by 17 UN bodies. It's completely open. Participation is for free. So there was no limitation in terms of, for example, how many representatives a city could involve, how many city representatives, even individual experts, they were able to participate in their individual capacity. So the process was quite transparent. And with all that, we had basically over 2 years, actually it was a quite, I would say, long process. It was 2.5 years, and during which we organized a series of workshops. We had even actually a World Cafe, and at that time, a physical World Cafe hosted by the ITU. And that gave us, lots of inputs in terms of, when you really have a first draft of KPIs, you really want to test it. and we were pretty grateful to the cities of, at that time, Dubai and Singapore, which were the first two cities that they decided to test the KPIs and report their progress, which means that, you know, we had really the ability to immediately know what was working, what it was not working. Saying that, the set of KPIs that we have, even now, are not perfect. We don't consider them perfect. You know, they have to be improved. They will continue to be improved. Indeed, actually, we will soon start a revision process. And for that, certainly, we will launch a public call, actually, for experts, where we would like to invite the city representatives, but you know, I would say smart city experts to participate in the revision process and tell us, you know, for example, what kind of KPIs should be added, noting, you know, for example, new emerging technologies which are being used by cities and how that affect or, you know, help cities to overcome their challenges.
Well, thank you very much, Cristina. And I think it's a good and interesting thing, because you mentioned KPIs, and I would like maybe to turn to Ger. So Cristina described some benefits for city, and you're working in Amsterdam. So I would like to know and to hear you about maybe the main drivers of your data strategy, especially in the considering the SDGs.
Yeah, thanks for that. I would say for our perspective is the, I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, we actually decided not to make a smart city strategy, but a digital strategy that was based on values. And these values are obviously around sustainability, but secondly, also about freedom for people in Amsterdam, safe digital space, and inclusive digital space. So what we try to do is to look at technology and the use of data from a value point of view, and then obviously afterwards start to talk about efficiency, economics, etc., or logical. But the starting point should be, how can you incorporate values in everything you do? So in our data strategy, we thought, well, these values are most important, and then we start to look at our development goals, which are the social development goals, but obviously as a city we have a few development goals for ourselves as well. So, and then when you start to look at these things, basically, you start to discover that actually the fundamental point of digital rights and a lot of digital perspective, when you look at human rights, you see that a lot of these UN human rights actually need the use of technology in a more, well, I would say, responsible way as well. Because once you start about collecting data from people, for people, even to reach sustainable development goals, you want to make sure they're, well, not only their privacy, but they have the right to know who's collecting their data, what it's being used for, do they have an opt-out possibility, etc. So obviously, I'm a big fan of using data, and I think our data department is relatively mature for a city as well. I think we have around 100, 150 people who work on data science on a daily basis. But our key question continuously is this what we do, is this relevant? Does it contribute to our goals? But secondly, also, do they fit into our purpose? So there's a lot of data we don't collect, example given within Amsterdam. There's a lot of data we actually don't want to share as well. We're as open as we can, but it's also data minimization where possible, basically, because once you still collect it, you should use it, etc. So obviously, we do believe in using data for sustainable development goals. We collect data on poverty, obviously, on mobility, on sustainability, and we open it as well. I mean, we have a data store like other cities as well that you mentioned. But there's also a lot of data we don't collect when it comes to, well, too close to people, what's the service they use in their personal living space. So we try to combine it with
Sorry, just to better understand, do you have like a committee or a special organization that is especially in charge of looking at data usage and potential data usage of the data you want to share, the relevance of?
Yeah, it's threefold actually. So we, first of all, our own employees are being trained in using data and what to do and what not to do. Then we have an independent commission, which needs to mandatory give their opinion when there's any data involved that relates to persons. And parallel to that, we will announce in a few weeks, we'll announce an initiative that's called Digital Rights House, which basically is a public panel we're organizing to look at our data as well. So we want to involve more citizens as well in the use of data as well. So we train our own staff using, as we name it, TADA principles. I drop a link in the chat. Secondly, we have a commission. And thirdly, we actually now want to in a more structured way, we want to discuss it with citizens as well. We now do it obviously in all types of sessions, in breakouts, in when there's a certain project, but we want to get that on a more generic level.
Very clear, thank you. And maybe where is the struggle for you? What is the main barrier to move forward into your strategy? And maybe I can address to you and also to Eric, because Issy-Les-Moulineaux is also quite advanced city in France. And Eric, when you have the chance, feel welcome to introduce a bit more about what you do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe a few words about Issy-Les-Moulineaux, because I'm sure nobody know us because we are a middle city, but we're one of the city of the Greater Paris, and one of the most innovative, like a hub of innovation field for the Greater Paris, because innovation and digital technology are the economic driving force in the city, because we have almost 60% of our companies based in the city in this field, like of course Capgemini, but also Cisco, Orange, Microsoft, or China Telecom. And we have a digital strategy since almost 25 years now, and we are in data field since a decade. And we have so a lot not a big, but an experience about how to use the data to try to create new services and new things for the people. And we do it in two major fields during this 10 years. One for the smart grid field, because we have a project called Issy-Grid. It was the first one in France to have a vision about all the city, not only on building, but it was for offices, for residential homes, or for public building, public streets on all of the districts. So we learn a lot during this project. It was a project between 2012 and 2018, and we are able to understand that, of course, with data we can manage the way we are organizing the production and the use of the electricity, for example. But the most important for us is to explain to the population why we have this data, why we use it, and how we can use it. For example, we had to discuss with our national authority of data protection, and it was the first time for them also to work in this kind of things, and we decided to use the data only for the building area, and not, of course, but in the home directly. And it was, of course, very interesting for us and very interesting for the population, because I think it was the first time they were able to understand why this data was important to change the way of life. And we do a lot of things also on smart mobility, because we create a consortium called So Mobility, and we test and experience a lot of different things like driverless shuttles or sensor and so on. And for the data, of course, the most interesting thing to do with that, it was to, and always today, to find a free parking spot available on the street or on the public parking. And but now we think we have to finish our digital transition, and we want to use the same method for the transition for the climate, and we adopt a carbon budget this year, inspired by the city of Oslo. We use it since several years. And the idea of the budget climate is to measure each year the greenhouse gas reduction in our territory with the pragmatic approach. For example, this year, it's only an objective of a reduction of 3%, but that means for us about 4,000 tons of CO2. But the most important is through this carbon budget, the city is highlighting its methods through 5 actions. Of course, respect the Paris Agreement, and because the city with almost zero emission by 2050, at least for the moment, and calculate a realistic setting for reducing emission for the coming year. And we have many initiatives that can contribute to this. For example, we have a lot of the low emission zone with the prohibition of diesel vehicle over the 15 years old. We have expansion the network of electric charging station. We have increased the number of charging back and adopt of a cycling plan, and we promote, of course, national initiative for the energy renovation of building and so on. And for us, the main challenge we have with this carbon budget is to identify the good indicators, the key and data that will make it possible to assess the evolution of greenhouse gas emission in the city. Because once the data has been identified, we have to imagine how to collect it, how to analyze it, and of course, all to present it to the population so they themselves can follow the effort. And this is the most difficult thing because we have to define a readable and useful dashboard so that the population can follow this evolution. And it's not easy because we think we don't have the useful data today. They are not available very often in open data. Sometimes they are expensive, and most of the time they are not in real time. And sometimes they are even with several years old. So we have to identify how the private actor can give us the data of their job and in this territory and negotiate it with them to obtain them without paying if possible. But it's a long-time job for us, but I think it's a big challenge for the next year.
So what I hear, Eric, regarding the main barrier right now, you mentioned the availability of data, the fact it's not always open and free, the updates is not always real time. You need to go through also different stakeholders like private company to try to collect the relevant data. So before that, you identify the relevant data for a specific use, in this case, the carbon budget. And you mentioned as well something about the visibility and the how do you communicate with citizens? That's the main barriers that I hear. Maybe Ger, do you agree with that? Do you see more in your case? What are the main challenges ahead of you when it comes to data usage for like smarter territory and more sustainable ones?
Yeah, I mean, our challenges are pretty clear. Right? In the end, I mean, cities everywhere around the world are growing, and we see that it's getting worse and worse. That the differences between opportunities for people in the city are getting difficult. There are a lot of examples where algorithms decide stuff that benefits a large group of people. I mean, utilism is flourishing around the world, but where inclusivity is not being taken care of. So I'm coming back to these values, and then when you talk more about normal type of challenges we look at a city, obviously in the field of mobility. I mean, look at the whole idea that we used to, as a city, we used to define how mobility would look like. I mean, we were putting signs at the street where people should go left and right and etc. Nowadays, everybody uses digital platforms to go from A to B. And so Waze actually has a bigger impact on where cars actually drive than we do nowadays when you look at it. So it's also the role of governments that are changing. So we get the data, we share the data, but it's a big challenge to make sure we also keep deciding if people drive what road, basically, because we also look at air quality, we also look at pedestrians, we also look at how the city looks like, how it grows, etc. So our challenges are not only the sustainable development goals or around poverty or mobility or air quality or sustainability, obviously plays a big role in energy transition. I mean, the merge of energy grids and the internet gives a tremendous opportunity for people to start their own energy companies, start to come up with new business models in a more generic sense. But it also shows that it's easier for in our data for people who have money to invest in solar panels or windmills. You see in every data analysis being done that most of the money for energy transition or for more green in the city goes to neighborhoods that actually have people living over there with a lot of money. And most subsidies for electric cars go to people with money. Most subsidies for green energy go to people who already have a house with solar panels on top of it, etc. So the data is also going to help to make this an honest transition, basically, I would say. And the biggest challenge, I would say, for us is to make sure everybody contributes, but also everybody benefits from the changes we're facing. I mean, does everybody still has access to mobility? I mean, we talk about sharing mobility platforms, mobility as a service everywhere, but I mean, does everybody has access to it? Well, no. When you don't have a credit card, it's already getting difficult for a lot of people and a lot of people don't have credit cards because they're not allowed to have credit. So actually, there's a lot of things in our data that say actually, well, the challenges are obviously around sustainability, growth, more houses, more people crowded in the city, tourism is growing everywhere. People travel around the world. On the one hand, and on the other hand, you want to make sure that every measure you take actually is, well, I would say, not making the gap between poor and rich is getting bigger, basically.
So, Ger, you are mentioning that everyone should benefit from it, and it's a main challenge. And precisely, we have a question from a participant that is asking how could AI and data analysis help addressing the housing shortage situation in Amsterdam and provide more sustainable solution there? Is it because it was something quite high in the first poll? Do you have like a few information on that? Is it a use case that you're looking at right now with the data use?
Asking to me, yeah. I would say yes. Yeah, I mean, it's the way you use data, the way you define the use of data, the way you involve citizens in the use of it, and make sure democracy plays a big role in that. I would say is relevant. Yeah.
And maybe back to Cristina regarding like the challenges that we just mentioned. What would be the best practices to take the most of data collaboration?
Well, I think that I tend to think that sometimes it is more useful to learn about what it went wrong, especially from cities, and to learn from them. There are really good examples like you know the activities and the initiatives that, for example, Ger shared that Amsterdam is doing, and certainly I'm sure that many cities worldwide, you know, they can replicate, you know, if not exactly the same model, but certainly a very similar model that applies to their case. When we talk about data collaboration, and going a bit back also to what Eric mentioned and the challenges sometimes in, you know, gathering data and getting the data on how to use the data. Well, I do believe that, you know, in that case, there is also, in a way, a role to play for cities in terms of now, probably more than ever, you know, cities are really considered as key players, especially when we look at the achievement of the SDGs overall, you know, in addition to all the challenges that they have to face, you know, of course, and in addition to the fact that more and more now we are confronted with new technologies, and also cities representatives, you know, they have also to select the best technology that fits, that specific need. And here, it comes also another part of the data collaboration, which is required in terms, of really having the right stakeholders involved in terms of for example, how to balance privacy versus security, how to, ensure that data, it is being used in the best interest of citizens, while, of course, maintaining a certain part of the data maybe not made available. So I do believe on the fact that, data collaboration needs to be adapted on a really case by case. Probably a generic statement does not really fit, because you can really have, data collaboration between two municipalities where they establish what they want to, how they want to use the data, how the data will help, each other. But also data collaboration is within the cities. You can have, even, for example, within the same city, having a problem that concerns, I don't know, parking or traffic congestions, and yet, well, you will find out that the department concern is not the only one dealing with transport, but you will have also, for example, the one that is dealing with, urban planning, that is also dealing with, the use of natural resources in the cities. So it really a cross collaboration also within departments, and that is data collaboration, because that really helps the city. So,
and maybe jumping on what you're saying, and also considering one of the questions from Brian here, you mentioned the ecosystem, and I was thinking about what also Eric mentioned of the difficulty sometimes to get information. I would like to know whether you also, as the city of Issy-Les-Moulineaux, and maybe Ger as well in the city of Amsterdam, it's interesting for you to get information from different stakeholders, but how do you share the information that you get, and how do you give access also to other stakeholders involved in this ecosystem, and maybe to achieve a win-win solution? Is it something considered yet, or how does it work for you?
For us, it's logical. If we are able to get these data that are useful to calculate our carbon budget, we will publish it in our data portal, because we want to share it with the most people as possible. It was not only the stakeholders from the private sector who are involved in this case. For example, in France, at least, the public administration is very slow to publish data in not in real time. Just it's a short time. For example, for the traffic situation, because it's of course one of the main interesting things to evaluate. We have information on 3 or 4 years ago, so it's not enough to be really reacting.
But when you share information with other stakeholders, like Cristina mentioned, there is a balance to find between privacy and security and so on. Do you have a control or a view on the use of the data you share, or is it like just open data?
No, it's just open. Of course, it's not personal data, so we don't have a problem with the data protection, but we don't have a vision of who is using our data. It's for us one of a problem, but it's logical of the open data.
I would like to add to that. I mean, I think we've been working on, since 2008, I've been working on open data. And actually, open data is, I would say, interesting, but especially not from a solving issues point of view, but relevant for a transparency point of view. So you should do it anyhow. But more and more we see that when you really want to make use of data, you should probably adjust to it. So we just have APIs that I dropped a link in the chat. I mean, we create APIs, and we obviously know who's sending queries to our APIs, basically. So a lot of data is being disclosed via APIs. But secondly, it's also about sharing data in a way that you actually agree and stuff. So we have digital partnerships with companies like Waze, Google, here, TomTom, to get their real-time data, but also push data back. So when we close a road, or there's a festival or something going on, whatever, we push data to them so they can get it in their digital platforms as well. but we also get data from MasterCard, example given on expenditure in cities based on background of people spending the money, energy companies, the health insurance company, and all of them we share data with, but also on getting their data and mostly opening it up where possible, especially the metadata, and create APIs. So, I mean, I think we now have up to 25, 26 data partnerships with several organizations, mostly them giving data to us to opening up for the public and making it for public use. Secondly, it's about data partnerships we create. Actually, we define use cases and then we make agreements on what data we're going to use and open up as well. So and also obviously we put nowadays in our procurement, probably that's the same in every city, Eric, as you said, in every procurement we do, we now have regulations about data. I mean, when we sign a contract, the data is ours, we can use it wherever we want to, etc.
Okay. So we have 5 minutes left for this panel, and I would like to hear you a bit more on the citizen activation, maybe. So how activate citizens to shape sustainable city, and is it possible through data collection or other type of citizen participation for you?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there's a lot of potential, obviously, and there we have several initiatives around citizen science, basically about stuff like air quality or traffic, and have them play a role in it as well. We even with companies like Waze, which is a social platform where people click on if there's traffic jams or something else, we ask them to provide it to us as well. Yeah, so it's in different ways. Ways with a S. So I would say involving citizens is key, also in discussions about, I mean, what data to share and what not. I mean, data being collected in a public space is by default open to everybody, I would say. So we, in the whole idea with which we started up with the Cities of Digital Rights Coalition, every data should be open to citizens, and that's the best way to get their feedback as well, if they want it or they don't want it, basically. So I would say stimulating citizen science in a broad way, but having them with subsidized projects where people actually have sensors at home and share their data with us. But secondly, also create a certain construction of digital rights where people actually have the right to complain to us and get their data, etc. So I think we would involve citizens several ways.
Okay, very interesting. Eric, do you have a comment on this?
I have to confess, I'm not very comfortable with this idea to collect data from the public. Of course, it's not the people themselves are in case it's more than their mobile phone and to follow the movement and when they share, not when they share, but when they send to us, for example, information about something happened on the street or something like that. But we are not invited them massively to share the data about traffic or energy or something like that, because they have sensors and it's automatical for that. One of lesson we learned in the smart grid experience is that the people, they don't care about the technology, about how it's working. What they want, of course, it's something is working well, and it's put them some very good services on the cheapest as possible. And it's the role of the industrial and the private sector to do something with that, for me.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Indeed, we conducted as well a survey, and we saw that the main concern about citizen is indeed not the technical part, is more on the service and having good housing, good mobility, and so on. So I also understand completely what you're saying, Eric. Cristina, I see you nodding. You want to add something on it?
I think that, this is a great example where we see this confronted, with the challenges, and also sharing somehow, on one side we see the one city that is more up, versus really collecting, data, and others that perhaps have a different approach. If we look at, for example, from our experience, it's important, you know, to involve, well, as I said, the stakeholders, in which case citizens, when it is really, you know, when they can really make a concrete, valuable support to the discussion, whether it is, you know, a new measure implemented in a city, whether there is a decision to take, and then, you know, in which case, what kind of feedback we do expect. Something that perhaps probably as a side note, but very important, is really that we encourage cities really to use international standards, and, you know, sometimes coming up with individual solutions may fit in the short term, but not necessarily in the long term, especially when it comes really to interoperability and sharing data, you know, with other cities. So that's once again an opportunity where, you know, also citizens, they can be involved, you know, and contribute to what they do believe that are key areas that should be looked at in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much to everybody